My name is Eleanor Hart, and I am 62 years old. For most of my adult life, I believed that peace was something you built intentionally, brick by brick, through patience and understanding. I thought I had done that in my marriage. After 40 years with my husband, Daniel, I had learned to accept his quieter nature, his tendency to keep the peace even when boundaries were crossed. I loved him for his gentleness, though sometimes I wished he would stand just a little firmer when his family pushed too hard. We lived in a modest but warm home that I had inherited from my parents 13 years earlier. It wasn't extravagant, just a comfortable 3-bedroom house on a quiet suburban street, surrounded by crepe myrtles that bloomed in soft pink every spring. My parents treasured that home. They bought it in the early 70s, raised us there, and passed it down to me in their will. When I lost them both, the house became more than property, it became a living memory, a place where their laughter still felt suspended in the walls. Daniel respected that deeply. He never once tried to claim it as his. He always said, "It's your family home, Ellie. I'm just grateful to be part of it." And for many years, that was exactly how our life felt, shared, balanced, respectful. His family, however, was another story. His mother, Helen, was a woman with a voice like a carving knife, sharp, thin, and always cutting just a bit too close. His sister, Margot, often floated in with the same dismissive confidence, acting as though she held dominion over everything around her. They weren't cruel in the theatrical sense. They were cruel in the subtle, persistent way that makes you question your own perceptions. Little comments. Little criticisms. A constant hum of superiority. Over the decades, I had learned to brush it off. Let them chatter. Let them judge. I knew what was real, the house was mine, the life I built there was mine, and their opinions didn't live under my roof. Or so I thought. The first sign that something was shifting happened on a Sunday afternoon in early autumn. I remember it because the air smelled like distant wildfire smoke, and I had all the windows closed. A thick envelope arrived in the mailbox, nothing dramatic, just an official-looking packet from the county assessor's office. It wasn't unusual, property records get mailed periodically. I set it aside without opening it immediately. But as I walked back inside, I saw a text message from Margot pop up on the family group chat. "Looking forward to using the guest room next month," she wrote. "It's so generous of you both to let us stay in our house again. We've been telling the cousins about it." Our house. Not my house. Not even your house. Their house. I stared at those words longer than I expected to. Something about the phrasing felt deliberate. Possessive. Almost territorial. A few minutes later, Daniel came into the kitchen with a cup of tea and glanced at my expression. "You look troubled," he said gently. "Everything all right?" I showed him the message. He exhaled slowly. She probably didn't mean it that way. But the thing was, Margot always meant everything exactly as she said it. I pushed it aside for the moment, but a quiet question lodged itself in my mind that day, something I'd never had to consider before. Why did they speak as though the house belonged to them? Little did I know that the answer would arrive in the very envelope I had tossed onto the dining table. And the truth in those pages would change everything, my marriage, my sense of reality, and the way I chose to defend what was mine. But I wouldn't discover that until much later, after the line had already been crossed. After my in-laws invited guests to their house. And after I realized they didn't see it as a slip of the tongue, they saw it as a claim. A claim they were bold enough to act on. 2 weeks later, the invasion began with a phone call, an event I remember vividly because of how ordinary the moment was just before it. I was pruning the dead blossoms from my potted geraniums on the front porch. The late afternoon sun was warm, and a light breeze carried the sound of children playing down the street. Everything felt safe. Then the phone rang. It was my neighbor, Carol. Her voice held a strain I had never heard before. "Eleanor," she said, "this may be none of my business, but there's a moving truck parked in front of your house." I blinked, confused. "A moving truck? Are you sure?" I'm looking at it right now. And there are two people hauling furniture inside. They said they were told the key was under the flower pot. My heart dropped. Who told them that? I didn't pry, she whispered. But they said the homeowners, your in-laws, sent them. I didn't wait another second. I hung up, grabbed my purse, and drove home faster than I'd driven in years. When I pulled into the driveway, there it was, a large white rental truck, back door open, two strangers carrying what looked suspiciously like Margot's old chaise lounge through my front door. The front door that should have been locked. The front door that was locked when I left earlier that morning. I jumped out of the car. Stop right there. I shouted. The two men froze mid-step. One shuffled awkwardly. Ma'am, we were told this home was being prepared for long-term family use. We were hired to move in these items. I demanded to know who hired them. The answer came like a slap. Helen and Margot. I stepped around them and marched into my own house. The living room was already being rearranged, my family photographs stacked haphazardly on the dining table, as though ready to be boxed. A stack of folded bedding that wasn't mine sat on my couch. A new carpet roll leaned against the wall. It felt like a slow-motion burglary. I dialed Daniel. When he picked up, the panic in my voice startled even me. Your family is moving into our house. The silence on the line stretched. What do you mean? I mean a moving truck is here. Furniture is going inside. They told these men they own the place. I'll be home immediately. But he wasn't home yet when the second wave hit. As I stood there trying to make sense of the insanity unfolding around me, my phone buzzed again. A text from Helen. We hope you don't mind. We told the cousins they could stay for the next couple of weeks. Since this house will be in the family soon, we're making some updates. In the family soon. Updates. There was no ambiguity now. They weren't pretending. They believed they had some legitimate claim, legitimate enough to send movers into my home. I felt something inside me settle, not panic, not fear, but a cold clarity. They had crossed a line so boldly that the only response left was deliberate, methodical action. And then, almost as if the universe had been waiting for the exact moment my rage turned to resolve, I remembered the envelope still sitting unopened on the dining table. The one from the county. I walked toward it slowly, the chaos of unfamiliar furniture behind me. I tore it open, expecting property tax documents. Instead, I found something else entirely. A notice of record inquiry. A request for ownership verification. Filed by Helen and Margot. They had attempted to change the deed. They had actually filed paperwork. The room swayed for a moment as the weight of their betrayal settled into me. They wanted my home. They thought they could take it through sheer audacity. And maybe they believed I was too old, too soft, or too polite to stop them. They had no idea who they were dealing with. When Daniel arrived, breathless and stunned, he barely had time to take in the state of the house before I handed him the county notice. He stared at it for a long moment, then sat heavily in one of the dining chairs, rubbing his forehead with trembling fingers. I didn't know, he murmured. Ellie, I swear, I never knew they filed this. His voice shook with sincerity, and I believed him. Daniel was passive to a fault, yes, but deceitful? No. If he had known, he would have said something, though not, perhaps, in the firm way I might have needed. His relationship with his mother had always been complicated, tied in knots by her subtle manipulations and guilt-driven demands. To understand how we ended up here, I need to explain something about Helen. She was raised in a world where appearances mattered more than reality. Her identity relied heavily on the illusion of control, control over her family, over her reputation, over the narrative of her life. And my house, inherited through my family line, symbolized something she wanted deeply: stability, legacy, and influence. 30 years earlier, when Daniel and I first married, she had openly dismissed the idea that I brought anything of value into the marriage. She once told me, while slicing cucumbers with pointed precision, you're lucky Daniel chose you. You come with no dowry, no assets, no connections. But you're polite, and that's something. I remember thinking that if politeness was a dowry, then she was bankrupt. When my parents passed and left me the house, Helen's tone changed, but not in the way one might expect. She didn't congratulate me or acknowledge my grief. Instead, she asked, "And what does Daniel get from this?" The answer, of course, was a home to share. But that was never enough for her. Over time, she began making subtle claims. "This is our family's holiday house. I'll invite the relatives over to our place. We should discuss renovations for our property." Each time, I corrected her gently. "It's my house. You are welcome to visit." She pretended she didn't hear. Looking back, I realized these were early attempts to rewrite the narrative. Small rewrites. Small erasures. A slow replacement of truth with her preferred version. And then there was Margot. If Helen was the strategist, Margot was the executor, loud, brash, and forever competing with an invisible opponent. She declared things as though they were fact, simply because she believed saying something confidently was the same as making it true. Years ago, she told me, "You and Daniel wouldn't have made it financially without us." Never mind that I had been the main earner during our early years. Or that she had borrowed money from us repeatedly. Reality bent around whatever story made her feel superior. I never held resentment. I simply created distance. I thought distance was enough. I was wrong. The deeper truth, the one I'd avoided for years, was that Helen resented the idea that Daniel lived in a home she didn't control. In her mind, her son deserved to inherit property from her, not live in something that came from another family's line. Twisted as it was, this was her motive. If she couldn't rewrite the past, she would rewrite the paperwork instead. And I knew then that this wasn't just entitlement or delusion, this was a calculated attempt to secure a future she believed belonged to her. But I also knew something else. She had underestimated me. I had been raised by two very strong, very practical people. My father taught me to keep every document, every receipt, every form. My mother taught me that silence is only polite when everyone is respecting the same boundary. When someone violates it, silence becomes surrender. And I have never surrendered anything without a fight. That night, long after the movers had retreated at my insistence, Daniel and I sat at the dining table in silence. He had apologized repeatedly for not anticipating his family's behavior, but I told him gently that guilt was useless now. What we needed was clarity, strategy, and documentation. I started by pulling out the old metal file box my father had given me when I was 19. It contained every deed, every insurance paper, every legal document tied to the house. My father used to say, "A paper trail is the strongest armor you'll ever wear." I spread the documents across the table. The original deed, dated 1973. The transfer to me after my parents' passing. The notarized letter confirming sole inheritance. Everything was immaculate, intact, and irrefutable. Meanwhile, Daniel called his sister. I listened to one side of the conversation, hearing more through the long silences than the words themselves. "Why did you file deed paperwork?" "No, it is not the family home. You had movers here today." "Margot, this is serious. You can't just claim property that isn't yours." Then came the sound of Helen's voice in the background, sharp, defensive, unmistakably hers. "She's old," she said loudly enough for me to hear through the speaker. "She doesn't need the burden of a whole house. And Daniel is my son. He deserves it after everything. We're simply taking what the family should have had. Taking. Not receiving. Not asking. Taking." Daniel hung up with a defeated sigh. "They don't think they did anything wrong. They think this is inevitable." I nodded. "Good. Let them think that. Their confidence will make their mistakes obvious." The next day, I contacted the county recorder's office. A sympathetic clerk pulled up the inquiry. Helen and Margot hadn't just requested ownership verification, they had begun drafting a quitclaim deed, attempting to submit it without my signature. "That's fraud," the clerk said. "They won't get far." "I know," I replied calmly. "I just need to see everything they attempted." I requested copies of every document they had submitted or partially filed. Each piece of information became a puzzle piece. Each puzzle piece became evidence. Then I spoke to a real estate attorney, not to sue, not yet, but to prepare. He reviewed my documents and nodded appreciatively. "You're well organized," he said. "They won't stand a chance. But let them dig deeper. The more they do, the more leverage you'll have." Leverage. I liked that word. Over the next week, I gathered everything: text messages, voicemails, the moving crew contract, and screenshots of Helen's messages claiming the house publicly on social media. I created a timeline of their actions, stored neatly in a labeled binder. I documented the attempted entry, the rearranging of my property, and the county's records of their fraudulent filing attempt. What surprised me most was how steady I felt. Not angry. Not panicked. Just resolved. Daniel watched me with quiet admiration. "You're handling this better than I would," he said. "I learn from the best," I replied. "My mother once said, when people try to steal what is yours, don't waste energy shouting. Just make sure the truth is louder." Finally, after a week of collecting evidence and letting my in-laws believe they were winning, a letter arrived in my mailbox, thick, official, sealed with the county's emblem. The deed confirmation packet. Everything I needed to shut this down. Everything I needed to make the truth louder. When the deed confirmation packet arrived, I didn't open it immediately. I wanted Daniel beside me. I wanted him to witness the clarity in writing, proof that the home was mine alone, that his family's scheme held no legal merit whatsoever. He sat next to me at the dining table, clasping his hands tightly. "Open it," he said. I unfolded the documents slowly, laying them out one by one. Each page stated the same essential fact. The property belonged exclusively to me. Sole ownership. No dispute. No shared claim. And then I saw the final page, the one that recorded attempted fraud. Helen and Margot had officially triggered a fraud alert by trying to file a deed transfer without my signature. The county had flagged it. Daniel exhaled shakily. "This is overwhelming. I can't believe they did this." "They did," I said calmly. "And they thought they could get away with it." He closed his eyes. "What do you want to do?" I placed a hand gently over his. "I want the truth to speak for itself. And I want them to see that truth. But before confronting them, I wanted to understand fully the extent of their delusion. So I did something that surprised even me. I invited them over. Not to ambush them. Not to yell. But to listen, to understand how far they had twisted the story." When they arrived, Helen walked in first, wearing a pearl necklace and the air of a woman expecting to be thanked. "I'm glad you finally came to your senses," she said, stepping into the living room as though doing me a favor. "We've already drawn up plans to repaint and replace the flooring. You'll love what we have in mind." Margot marched in behind her. "We need to do this quickly. The cousins already booked flights for next month." "Booked flights? For my house?" I sat down calmly. "Why don't we talk about the deed?" Helen's smile faltered. "What about it?" "I received documents confirming ownership." "Yes," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "We helped speed the process along. That house should have been in Daniel's name years ago." "It's not," I said. "It's in mine." Helen's voice turned icy. "Only because your parents made a foolish decision. But we've corrected that." "Corrected what?" She lifted her chin. "We submitted a quitclaim deed. Family property should stay within the rightful line." "Rightful," I repeated softly. "Yes," she snapped. "Not in-laws. Blood." There it was. the core of her delusion. I opened the binder I had prepared and slid a page forward, the fraud alert. Helen's face drained of color. Margot leaned in, scanning the page, a deep crease forming between her brows. "This," Margot sputtered, "this must be a mistake." "No," I replied. "The mistake was thinking you could take something that doesn't belong to you." I slid forward the mover's contract next. Then the screenshots of their messages. Then the county's written confirmation of sole ownership. One document after another landed like a quiet, devastating drumbeat. By the time I finished, neither woman spoke. Helen squeezed the arms of her chair until her knuckles whitened. "You orchestrated this." "I documented this," I corrected. "You orchestrated it." Margot swallowed hard. "So what now?" "That," I said, "depends entirely on how you choose to behave next." But deep down, I already knew how they would behave. And that certainty gave me the power to finish what they had started. The official confrontation took place 3 days later. I wanted it on neutral ground, so I requested that we meet at Daniel's childhood home. Helen agreed reluctantly, likely believing she could maintain control in familiar territory. Daniel came with me, though he hadn't slept well since learning of their scheme. When we pulled into the driveway, he whispered, "Whatever happens today, I'm with you." We walked inside where Helen and Margot sat rigidly on the living room couch, their expressions taut with a mixture of entitlement and irritation. I placed the binder on the coffee table and began with a calm tone. "I'm here to discuss what you attempted," I said. "And what needs to happen now?" Helen crossed her legs sharply. "We already explained ourselves. You've been living in a house too large for you. Daniel should be managing it." "It's my inheritance," I said. "My parents left it to me. Not to Daniel. Not to you." "But family property should stay with the bloodline," she snapped. "And it will," I replied. "Through me. I am the bloodline of my parents. You are not." Margot scoffed. "This is ridiculous." "No," I said evenly. "Fraud is ridiculous. Breaking into a home you don't own is ridiculous. Bringing movers into a property you have no legal right to enter is ridiculous." Helen bristled. "We had a key." "A key that was given to you for emergencies," I corrected. "Emergencies do not include redesigning my home for guests you scheduled without permission." Daniel finally spoke, his voice trembling but firm. "Mom, you crossed a line. This could have gotten you arrested." Helen looked betrayed. "You're taking her side?" "There is no side," Daniel said. "There is only the truth." I opened the binder once more but didn't hand them documents this time. They had already seen the evidence. Now it was time for clarity, not proof. "I will not press charges," I said calmly. "Not today. Not if you agree to the following terms." Margot straightened. "Terms?" "Yes. Boundaries, legally documented if necessary." Helen stiffened. "You can't dictate terms to us." "I can," I replied gently, "because you attempted to steal from me. And you will face consequences if this ever happens again." I lifted my chin and looked at them both evenly. "Here are the terms. 1. You will no longer enter my property without explicit written permission from me. 2. You will not refer to my home as yours, the family home, or our property ever again. 3. You will cancel any plans involving guests, renovations, or occupancy of my home. 4. If you attempt to file any additional claims or inquiries about the property, I will pursue charges." The room sat in stiff silence. "You can't be serious," Margot whispered. "I am," I said. "Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft in progress." Helen's voice cracked. "I was trying to do what's best for our family." "Then you should have respected the family we already have," I replied. Her eyes flashed, not with remorse, but with the sting of defeat. Daniel stood beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "If you can't follow these boundaries," he said softly, we will step back from this relationship. That stunned them more than anything I had said. In the end, they didn't apologize. But they agreed. Their agreement was sharp, bitter, reluctant, but it was still agreement. And I walked out of that house knowing the balance had shifted forever. Despite their verbal agreement, I knew Helen and Margot's behavior wouldn't change overnight. People built on entitlement don't crumble in one confrontation. They erode slowly under the pressure of unmistakable truth. So I took one final step. I filed a formal, no unauthorized entry notice with local authorities, non-criminal, but recorded. Anyone entering my property without permission could be removed immediately. No arrests unless they resisted. It was the gentlest legal boundary available, but firm enough to matter. Then I had the exterior locks changed and installed a camera system, quietly, professionally, and without fanfare. Daniel supported every decision. In the days that followed, I saw something shift in him too. A lifetime of appeasing his family had left him muted in their presence. Now, he stood straighter. He spoke clearer. He apologized, not for them, but for how long he had let them diminish me. But the real consequences came a week later. Margot called Daniel, furious. The cousins canceled their trip because we had to tell them the house wasn't available. They think we lied to them. You did lie, Daniel replied calmly. They think I'm unstable. Well, Daniel said gently, maybe now you'll reflect on why. Next came Helen's social embarrassment. She had told half the extended family that she and Margot were moving into their future property. When the truth unraveled, people whispered. They questioned. They judged. Her prestige, her favorite possession, cracked. But I didn't revel in any of this. I didn't want humiliation. What I wanted was distance, peace, and acknowledgement of truth. And that came, unexpectedly, from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Helen's older sister, Abigail, called me. Her voice was gentle, aged, thoughtful. I heard what happened, she said. I'm sorry. Helen has always believed that control is love. It isn't. That's generous of you, I replied. No, she said. It's honest. And I'm calling because I want you to know something. Your home, your inheritance, your lineage matters. Protect it. And don't let guilt or obligation make you soften those boundaries. That was the first time someone in Daniel's family validated my experience. Meanwhile, the documents I had compiled stayed in my binder, tucked in a drawer. I didn't flaunt them. I didn't threaten with them. I simply kept them, my shield of truth. Within 3 months, Helen and Margot visited less. Their messages became shorter. Invitations stopped. Expectations stopped. Entitlement dissolved into wary distance. But boundaries aren't consequences. Consequences are what happen when truth forces people to face themselves. And those were unfolding quietly, day by day. Life has returned to its peaceful rhythm now. The crepe myrtles outside have begun another cycle of blooms, and the house feels like it's breathing easy again. The rooms are undisturbed. The furniture sits exactly where I placed it. The photographs of my parents smile down from the mantel. Sometimes I walk through the house at dawn, barefoot on the cool floors, letting the quiet remind me of everything this home has weathered: family gatherings, grief, joy, dinners, arguments, celebrations, and now, an attempted theft by those who mistook audacity for rightful claim. Daniel and I are stronger than we've been in years. The confrontation forced us both to grow, him, in courage, me, in voice. We talk honestly now about boundaries, about expectations, about how love does not require surrender. As for Helen and Margot, the distance between us has become part of the natural order. We remain cordial but separate. They know where the lines are drawn. They know what truth is documented. And they know I am willing to defend what is mine, not with rage or vengeance, but with clarity and evidence. Ethical revenge is not about hurting someone. Ethical revenge is about revealing truth so clearly that deception has nowhere left to stand. When the deed arrived in my mailbox, I realized something important: power doesn't always come from shouting or fighting. Power sometimes comes from opening an envelope, gathering facts, and allowing reality to speak uninterrupted. My parents raised me to value honesty, dignity, and boundaries. In honoring the home they left me, I honored them. To anyone listening to my story, I'll leave you with this. When someone tries to take what belongs to you, your home, your peace, your identity, you do not owe them a fight. You owe yourself the truth. And the truth, once gathered and documented, becomes the strongest voice in any room. Thank you for listening to my story. If you'd like to hear more stories like this one, I invite you to share your thoughts or your own experiences. Your voice matters, and your story might help someone else find their strength.